This is the most that I have ever read in a month since I got back into reading. Hey y'all, welcome back to my channel. Hi, hello, how are you? How has your week been? In the month of October, I read 16 books. That is crazy. Before this month, my record for the most amount of books I had read in a month was 11. And then this month I read 16 books. That's actually wild. Well, since we've got a lot of books to cover, let's not waste any time and just dive right into it. So the first book I finished this month was Forcing Fate. This book is just a Fourth Wing knockoff. I was actually disappointed that I did not enjoy this book as much as I was hoping that I would. This girl wants to be a dragon rider, but she unfortunately does not get picked to be a dragon rider. But she still wants to have a hand in the war effort and everything, so she decides that she is going to be the first woman to ever be in her world's military. This book is extremely old-fashioned, so there was a lot of misogyny wrapped up in everything in this book, so it's obviously very difficult for her. And then the love interest is one of the generals in the military, and he actually despises her and goes out of his way to make her life miserable. And so I didn't really like it because it was reading a lot like a bully romance, and a bully romance is just not something that I can get into. But the main character also was extremely naive in just every aspect of her life and would refuse the counsel of people who are older than her, who could see clearly and see that she was making poor decisions. And it was just really frustrating because on one hand she wouldn't want special treatment for being the only girl in the military, but then also at the same time was expecting accommodations because she was a girl, and it was just girl, you need to make up your mind. And also I feel like she really didn't understand the gravity of the decision that she was making. You know, it was such a spur of the moment decision and everything, and I don't think she fully realized how much of her life it was going to affect, and it was just really frustrating to watch. I can see that on Goodreads. I rated this a 2 stars. However, I think I'm now going to have to lower that because this book really frustrated me. When I step back and look at it, there really was no part of this book that I personally enjoyed, which is so interesting because one of my really good friends, who I talk about books with her all of the time and we're constantly giving each other book recs, she rated this a 4 stars. And I'm over here 1 star, despised it. And I think that this book is part of a trilogy, and I will 100% not be continuing the series. Then I read The Fifth Wave by Rick Yancey. This book was just super nostalgic. This was a reread. I don't know, I was just feeling in the mood to read a really good post-apocalyptic dystopian fiction. This book follows Cassie, and she is navigating the world in the wake of several extinction level events that have been brought about by the sudden appearance of aliens on Earth. In all of the chaos, she has gotten separated from her little brother, but she made a promise to him that she was going to find him. She is going to do everything in her power to keep that promise, or she's going to die trying. Dystopian fiction, post-apocalyptic, those are one of my favorite genres. It's not one that I typically read much. You know, I feel like people see dystopian as oh, that's so 2012. I personally haven't read any dystopian post-apocalyptic books that have been released in recent years that weren't already part of an existing series. And so it was super fun to be back in that type of world and everything. And as someone who often deals with intrusive thoughts surrounding these types of situations, I feel like this is a better outlet for me to obsess over those thoughts rather than just out of the blue. So I gave this a 4 stars. Then I read the Twilight series, all 4 of them, Twilight, New Moon, Eclipse, and Breaking Dawn. These books were a trip, okay? I just watched the movies for the first time earlier in the year. They're so bad that they're funny, and reading the books was kind of a similar experience. So if you don't know about Twilight, this book series follows Bella, who moves to Washington State to live with her dad and very quickly gets tangled up in a vampire family, and it kind of wrecks her entire life. So many times when I was reading this, I kind of had to put the book down and just stare off into space and be what on earth am I reading? It's so interesting because I feel like the books are funnier than the movies. Like, I feel like when they were making the movies, they tried to take the books so seriously, and I'm like, dudes, this book is literally about vampires, written by a Mormon woman, okay? These books cannot be serious. They cannot be taken seriously. And I feel like that's where a lot of the disconnect between the books and the movies came from, is because when they made the movies, they tried to take everything so serious and wanted it to be this super dramatic thing. And it's like, no, you can't do that with these books. And also, like, in the books, the characters did have a lot more personality. Their characters kind of got watered down when they were making the movies. The last book, though, was really just, I did not know what to think. Jacob, particularly in the last book, there is nothing that you can say to me that can make Jacob's situation in the last book, like, morally okay in my eyes. I find it so interesting that these books are still so wildly popular in spite of the presence of that situation that's in the final book. Like, I feel like that would make a lot of people, like, dislike the books, but clearly it doesn't. I'm giving this series a 3 stars. I don't know why. Then I listened to the audiobook of To All the Boys I Loved Before. This book follows Lara Jean. In her life, she has made it a sort of weird tradition that when she decides she no longer wants to like a boy, she writes him a love letter, and then she goes as far as to, like, address the letters, which I don't know why you would do that if you never intended on them reading them. Somehow her letters get mailed off, and so all of the boys that she has written these love letters to now have these love letters. And one of those boys is her sister's very recent ex-boyfriend.
Awkward.
Which is really awkward because they are also really good friends. And so in an effort to try to salvage her relationship with this boy, she decides to start fake dating this other guy who is like the least likely person she would ever date. I don't know. This book was another example on why movie adaptations annoy me. I have seen the first movie of this series' adaptation, and the whole time while I was reading the book, I was waiting for things that happened in the movie to happen in the books, and they didn't, because they took creative liberty with the movie. And I'm like, no. When you are making a movie adaptation of a well-known book, people are coming to see their favorite book brought to life, not to see you put your own creative spin on it. What are you doing? The story already exists. The characters that people love already exist. You don't need to be making changes to them. But this was a cute, fun little read. 3.5 stars. Then I listened to the audiobook of Out on a Limb by Hannah Bonham Young. This book follows Wynn. She was born with a limb difference on her hand and has always been uber independent. She works hard to be independent to kind of counteract, like, the things that her hand makes more difficult for her, which in turn causes some sticky situations because she has a one-night stand with this man named Beau, and then she gets pregnant, and he wants to take care of her and everything, which, like, goes against her hyper independence. So the book is just kind of like them trying to navigate this, you know, learn how to be like co-parents with this person that they really don't know. I love this book. It is so super cute because Beau is just like the cutest. He wants to take care of her, but understands that that is not really how she likes to do things, and so he comes up with like compromises that they both can agree on. He just works so hard to like make everything work, and it's just so cute. 4 stars. Then I read The Reappearance of Rachel Price. This book follows Belle, whose life has constantly been overshadowed by the circumstances surrounding her mom's disappearance when she was really young. Her dad, for whatever reason, decided to agree to people making a documentary about Belle's mom. In the midst of them creating this documentary, her mom, Rachel Price, comes back after like 16 years of being missing. And then of course there's some weird situations and details surrounding that whole thing. Belle is trying to figure out what on earth is going on because something seems a bit fishy. I loved this book. I really love Holly Jackson. I have read her Good Girls Guide to Murder series and I gave those 5 stars. She writes books that constantly keep you on the edge of your seat. It's interesting that she writes like YA mystery thrillers, but they're also like very dark. Not just in their subject matter, but the overall vibe that you get from the book is very dark. And I find it so cool that she's able to do that with literally ink on paper. Like, a book is literally words printed on paper, and she's able to create this whole atmospheric vibe just from like the words that she's using to describe things. But I stayed up like 2.5 hours past my bedtime to finish this book because I just could not put it down without knowing how it was gonna end. And that feeling was just so much fun. Just like being that intrigued in a book that you can't literally cannot put it down. I was a little bit disappointed by the romance. So that like brought the rating down a little bit, but luckily I don't read Holly Jackson books for the romance, so I still really enjoyed the book. 4.5 stars. Then I read I Did Something Bad. This book follows Kin, who is Myanmar, and she gets an assignment to write a cover story on the latest Hollywood heartthrob Tyler, who is also Myanmar, because he is filming a movie in his hometown, which like never gets represented. So it's like a big thing for their country, for their town, and their people. And so she is going to shadow him for 2 months while he's filming this movie to write the cover story for Vogue. This book, I had a fun time reading it up until we got to the third act conflict, because I was reading the third act conflict and I was like, hold on, I'm not understanding why this is a problem. It was almost like we kind of forgot what kind of book we were in, because like to me it just was not translating why the problem was a problem. And so that really created a disconnect for me in the book, and so then unfortunately I didn't end up enjoying that as much as I was hoping I would. 3 stars. Then I read The Fallback Plan, which is the second book in the Sweater Weather series. This book follows Julie McGraw, who has moved back to her little small town of Harvest Hollow, which is interesting because she really hated growing up there, but she kind of wants to show everybody how much better she's doing, how successful she's doing, how much her life has changed for the better since she left. And through a series of unfortunate circumstances, she gets tangled up with the sheriff, Lucas Cole, who also happens to be the guy that she tutored in high school. That was like bad news, big troublemaker. So it's also interesting how he ended up being the sheriff. But they're like kind of cute together. Did I mention he's a single dad? I love this series because it takes no brain power. They're super cutesy. They're quick reads and just are a blast. So this gets a 3 stars. Then I went on to read the third book in the Sweater Weather series, Can't Help Falling, which follows Emmy, who is the owner of the bookstore / cafe in the town, but she also has a romance advice podcast, but it's anonymous because she herself doesn't really have much experience in the romance department. Her experience comes from reading a lot of romance books. But her house catches on fire, and the firefighter who carries her out of her burning home is her best friend's older brother, who she used to be pretty good friends with when she was in high school. Because of the whole fire, they keep getting lumped in situations that they don't necessarily want to be in, and so as they're reconnecting and getting to know each other, maybe they fall in love or something. This one, I think the female main character was the most relatable out of the 3 books I have read in this series, because she's just as me, okay? She doesn't have much experience in the romance department, reads probably too many romance books, okay? Like, that is literally me. But also, like, the discussions that the couple got into, like, during the book was also, like, a lot deeper than I thought I was gonna be getting into, like, reading this book, which was a lot of fun to read. This book, I originally rated it a 3 stars, but I think I'm gonna have to up that to like a 3.75 stars. Then I read Hidden Pictures. This book follows Mallory, who is trying to get her life together as she is in recovery from a drug addiction, and she gets a job as a live-in nanny for this little boy who has a creepy imaginary friend. It's really all you need to know about this book. This book did really spook me, particularly because it dealt a little bit with possession, which I tend to stray away from. And I mean, it kept me on the edge of my seat. It did its job as a thriller, but I really did not like the ending of this book. I felt like it didn't kind of flow right in with the rest of the story. Then it just kind of fell flat for me at the end, which the ending is like the most important part of the thriller novel. You know, when the author kind of like ties everything together and you can see how everything was connected. And so if you don't like the end of the book, it kind of puts a damper on the rest of the book. So I'm giving this a 3.25 stars. Then I read The Housemaid by Freida McFadden. I'm not going to tell you what this book is about because I feel like going blind into this book is the best way. It's how I went into this book and I had the most fun ever. Okay, I can see why this is probably her most famous book and why it's getting made into a movie. Like, this book was so much fun and kept me on the edge of my seat, and I am definitely going to be reading the rest of the books in this series. 4.5 stars. Then I read A Horror Store by Grady Hendrix. This book takes place in an IKEA knockoff store, and the employees are finding very strange occurrences when they are coming into the store in the morning for their shifts, and so some of the employees get tasked with staying overnight to figure out what is causing these strange occurrences. And this book, I enjoyed it until about like the halfway mark, which is when we started seeing the cause of these strange occurrences. And then I just thought that that was like so out of pocket and like didn't really make sense to the rest of the story. So I just kind of ended up reading the second half of the book as fast as possible so that I could be done reading the book. Now, I don't know if maybe it had something to do with the fact that this book was only 220 pages, which is like at least 100 pages less than like the average length of a book. And so maybe like he didn't really have enough time to kind of like explain the connection and really like build that whole part of the plot up. Once I got to the 50% mark and we started getting that, I was just over it and I like wanted to be done with it. So I'm giving this a 2 stars. Then the final book that I read in October was The Only One Left by Riley Sager. I kind of developed a theme in the last couple books that I read this month because this book follows Kit, who gets a job as a live-in caregiver for this woman who, when she was younger, was accused of killing her entire family. So obviously, Kit wants to know what really happened that night. I enjoyed reading this book. There were some things that I had a little bit of trouble with. This book takes place in the 80s, and sometimes I had a little bit of trouble like remembering that when it came to like referencing the night of the murders or like talking about characters' ages. Like, I just kind of had a little bit of trouble keeping it straight. I feel like we didn't firmly establish like when the book was set and like how that affected the way we saw the characters and the way that they interacted and what that meant for like how old the characters were, how long had they been living in this town. And I just got a little bit mixed up some of the time, so that like I had to like go back and be like, oh wait, yeah, this book takes place like 40 years ago. This is not taking place in present time. And also the last 40 pages just seemed a little bit rushed and thrown together. It almost seemed like Riley Sager got to the end of writing this book and realized that there were several loose ends that needed to be tied up, and rather than like going back and weaving them into the story, he just kind of tried to mash them all together all at once in a way that didn't feel organic or natural. And so it felt super rushed and choppy, which is unfortunate because now this book has the title of my least favorite Riley Sager book. 3.5 stars. Wow. I feel like I've been talking for a million years trying to go over all 16 books that I read this month. That is literally crazy. And it's only just now dawning on me that I did not have one single 5-star, which is weird because I'm usually giving out 5 stars left and right. Is there something wrong with me? Anyways, that is all I have for you guys today. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up so that I know that you guys enjoy this type of content. Comment down below your most favorite and your least favorite book that you read this past month. And subscribe to my channel for more bookish content in the future. I hope you have a lovely rest of your week, and I will see you guys next time. Bye.